And we're going to start recording this session. Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, we can see the infinity screen. Okay. Well, you all are so sweet and so nice. I appreciate it. Okay. I'm waiting for it to convert. There we go. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Can everybody see that okay? So, as I said before, the session is going to be about how 130, how to be successful for Bio 130, and things of that nature. All important things, but things I'm going to share with you today can also be applied to your other classes. Mind as we go through the slides and talk more about what it means to be a successful student. So let's take a look at this slide right here. So first thing I want to talk to you about is the difference between active and passive learning. So it basically, the definition, it's basically what the word says. Active learning, you're an active participant. You're actually doing something to help along the learning process, as opposed to passive learning, where you're just kind of letting things happen to you and you're not really absorbing anything. So an example of that is kind of like, you ever been in a class where you're just kind of sitting there and you're watching the professor talk, their lips are moving, and you may even hear or understand a few things that they say. But after that class, when you're thinking about, what you learned, or maybe you're filling out your Socrative, you don't really know what happened in the class because you can't remember anything because you didn't, put anything into learning it. And that's like the perfect example of passive learning. It happens to all of us at some point, including myself. But there are ultimately things that you can do to prevent that, right? So I'll draw your attention to the graphic then. So people generally remember 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, and 30% of what they see. And that's all a part of passive learning. That's the being in lecture and just watching the professor and hearing them. But we remember 50% of what we see and hear, 70% of what we write and say, and 90% of what we do. So active learning is a really important part of being a successful student because, when you're taking a test, memory and learning, that's all you've got. You don't have access to any of your notes or materials. So everything that you've converted, from words on the page to memory, and you've learned these concepts, that's all you've got. That's all that it is at that point. So that's why it's important to be an active participant in your learning. So when you're in class, that means that you're actively asking and answering the professor's questions. That means that you're writing down notes, writing down things that the professor says that you might forget later and reviewing that on your own time, right? Because when we write stuff down, we may not remember it as well as when we write it down and then we revisit it later and actually, look at what we wrote and, what it means. So just keep that in mind. So that's my spiel about active and passive learning. So another thing that I'd like to discuss is knowing your learning style. So how many of you would you say actually know your learning style? What type of learner you are? Okay, I see a hand. So would you care to send it in the chat what type of learner you are? Okay, cool. Kinesthetic learners are usually athletes. Are you an athlete, Warren? Yeah, that's really cool. I've noticed that. Kinesthetic learners are really hands-on, that's the way that they learn best. So incorporating certain techniques based on what type you are. Okay, Simone is also kinesthetic. Cool. So you are is important because you can incorporate techniques specifically you learn better. Okay, Madeline and auditory, Allison reading and writing. Okay, yeah, so that we have some variety. I am visual and auditory, so that like it's okay to not just fall under one category and to fall under multiple. So that's multisensory. A lot of people are also multisensory. So if you don't know your learning style, you can easily find an inventory online, and I'll show you one later, a link to one. It's called the VARC Learning Style Inventory. If you are in a university class, you probably have already taken it and reviewed results, which I think is a really cool part of the university. Oh, cool. So we'll talk about a little bit about what that means then, your results. Okay. So I've got some tips for how to study if you are a specific type of learner. So here, how to study if you're a visual learner. So obviously visual, you have to see it. It has to be in front of you in order for you to process it. So we look at some tips. So and use graphics for learning. So like charts and diagrams, anything that you can put on the page in front of you and look at, that definitely helps with learning and retention of the information. Color coding and organizing notes, making things very bright and vivid, that helps. Using highlighters to highlight important concepts. I do that sometimes. That helps me a lot. Write out instructions given verbally. So sometimes if you are a visual learner, you have a hard time being an auditory learner, right? So when you write out the instructions, they're there on the page so you process the information better. And then use flashcards. A lot of people that I know use flashcards to study because, you see them, they're right in front of you, and you can go back to them as needed. And Quizlet is a really good app or website to go to if you enjoy using flashcards. Okay, so that's for our visual learner. Now let's go over some tips for the auditory learner. So obviously auditory learners learn best when they hear things. They hear people speak or they're talking to other people. So some ideas for the auditory learner: record your lectures and listen to them. Of course, always get your professor's permission to record them. Most of them don't mind if you record their voice and listen to it at a later time, but it's still just, respectful to ask. Also use rhymes and jingles and mnemonics to remember concepts. Read your notes aloud. See, that I'm an auditory learner, and that's one of my favorite things to do, but it can be quite annoying for somebody else because I'm over here reading my notes aloud, basically talking to myself, and my friends will trying to study, and most of them are like visual or they're reading. And so it helps to also link up with other people who learn the way that you do. So, because it helps, you, and it helps them study better. So also keep that in too. Um, for auditory learners, you want to reduce distractions by working in quiet areas, right? Because you're really picking up on all that you're hearing. So you want to just hone in on one thing that you're hearing, which is either yourself talking about the topic that you're studying, or someone else. And then also discuss topics with other students and professors. And it also helps with this, like in class. Like if Dr. Arnett gives you all free time to kind of like turn to your neighbor and like discuss a topic, an auditory learner, yes, 100% take advantage of those opportunities. And when she asks questions, in class, try to answer them. If you're an auditory learner or really any type of learner, it will definitely benefit you in the long run. Okay, so that's it for auditory learner, and you can find tons of tips online if you go looking for them. Okay, for our read-write learner, so take plenty of notes. Turn diagrams and charts into words and descriptions. If you like to read and write, note-taking is typically your thing. You probably have the most detailed notes of anybody. Rewrite your notes after class. That helps when you write things, especially in like different colored pens and stuff, you tend to remember them better. Remember, it's a part of the act of learning, being an active participant in your learning. Read chapters of the textbook and summarize the points at the end. Write notes yourself in the margins, maybe as you're in class and you're thinking of things, just so you can remember it later. And then, of course, use colored pens and highlighters to make certain concepts stand out. That also helps. And finally, our kinesthetic learners, our hands-on learners. So usually, kinesthetic learners are some of the best people at like labs and experiments because they just, they want to jump right into it, and that's great. So you should definitely make use of lab time and hands-on experiments. And you can create your own charts and graphs, or even like teach the material to someone else. So something I also like to do at the library, there are these study rooms on the 4th floor, and they don't have one person in them right now, but something that might help with your kinesthetic is that in those study rooms, there's a whiteboard and, dry erase markers. So, you can move around while you're writing stuff on the board. And sometimes it's not always about incorporating movement into your studying, but just moving around while you're studying sometimes helps you focus better as a kinesthetic learner. And you can teach the material to someone else, just kind of like stand at the whiteboard and kind of like motion and do all that good stuff. And like I said, incorporate physical actions into studying. If you have like a major like exercise science or something like that, that'll be a lot more easier. But there are tons of ideas on the internet that you could probably find. And use the trial and error method when applicable. What if there are questions? Okay, 1 second. Let me read this in the chat. Okay. Yeah, Simone, I definitely understand. So, Dr. Arnett is the type of professor that if you have a question, she definitely wants you to ask it because chances are you're probably not the only one in the class with that question. And so by asking that question, you're only helping yourself, but you're helping other people. So definitely, if you have a question at any point, you should ask it and just know that you're probably helping, 10 to 15 other people at any given time. So don't be afraid to ask questions and get the help that you need. And if you don't feel comfortable speaking up in class, catch me or Jasmine after class or even Dr. Arnett after class. Okay, kinesthetic learners, read-write learners, visual, and auditory. So if you don't know your learning style, here is one of the inventories I was talking about, the VARC. And this is not the only one, of course, but this is probably the most common one. So, if you want me to send you the link after the study session, or you just need the name of it, just like send me an email and just be like, hey, what was the name of that inventory? Or just take some time to write it down now. Okay. So I gave you some tips based off of your learning style. If you don't know your learning style, figure that out. I promise it will definitely help you in the long run. I feel like after I learned my learning style, my study skills improved so much. And when your study skills improve, you become a more successful student, better grades in classes, and you just feel more confident. And confidence is a really big part of being a successful student, being confident in your ability to succeed and to do well. And we want that for you. Okay, and then my final slide, really. So, general tips for success in the class. Of course, you need to attend all classes, right? Because something new happens in every class, and it's essential to attend, and it's also worth points. So attendance is a grade. So you definitely want to make sure you're coming to class, you're showing up on time, and you're doing your Socrative afterwards, because that's how we take attendance. And another thing I want to add about the Socrative is that you want to be as specific as possible, because Jasmine and I use the Socratives to kind of tailor our study sessions. So starting next week, we'll be doing content ones. So what you all put in the Socrative with like what you need help with is what we will be going over in the study session. So that's why it's important, and that's part of the reason why we ask you to be so specific, because we just want to make sure that we're covering, ground, basically. Excuse me. Take notes during class. Ask questions and answer the professor's questions. So this is all about being an active learner again. It's like doing something in class to help with your learning and help with your memory. And it'll ultimately just, help with like studying and help with like retention. And so when you actually go to study for a test or something, you can refer back to your notes and be like, okay, I remember when we went over this, and you can like compare what you know to what you don't know and kind of assess how much you need to study this topic, or if you need to move on to another one. You need to complete all homework and research assignments. Again, those are grades, super important. They help you develop skills that you'll need for later classes as well. So I highly recommend completing all of those. Scheduling tutoring when needed. So we showed you all how to do that, and a few of you have already done that, so good job. And so yeah, it's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, all of us have scheduled tutoring at some point or another. I have. I had anatomy, I think last year, and I scheduled tutoring appointments for that. And my tutor was a really big help to me be successful in the class. So I definitely recommend, if you're struggling, even if it's just a little bit and you just want a little bit more one-on-one time, schedule a tutor. And that's not just for this class, but for any class. Study for all exams. Okay, that's another point I want to touch on, because I've met a few people who, they feel like they're good with the material, so they're like, oh, okay, I'm fine. I'm not going to study for this exam. And then what happens test time, and things don't work out quite as expected because they found out that they really didn't understand it to the extent that they thought they did. So definitely don't be confident, but don't be overconfident, if you know what I'm saying. So study, put in the work, and don't overdo it or overrun yourself or anything. Take breaks. Breaks are important. But definitely study for all exams, and get together with your peers and form study groups and help each other out. It helps when you have other people who are doing the same thing that you're doing, so you can kind of, feed off of each other's ideas and communicate back and forth. And lastly, attend study sessions held by TAs, which you are currently doing. And this one's for extra credit, so that makes it extra sweet. But the content study sessions, I highly recommend attending those because we also have access to the exams, and we know what's going to be on there. We know what to expect, and so we can kind of relay that information back and forth and kind of like tell you which topics to really hone in on and answer any questions that you might have about like the general formatting and things like that. So I told you guys this is going to be a relatively short session because it's just study skills and just general tips for success. But are there any questions? And feel free to pop up with the audio or, just type in the chat box. You have any questions for me about the class maybe, or, just in general, even about the university, I can answer those as well. And I'm going to take a picture of everyone's name in the group chat so that I can get you all your extra credit because it's well deserved. No questions? Okay. How soon will the first test be? So if you look on your syllabus, I think the first test is coming in like 2. It opens September 25th. Thank you for that, Kaylee. So yeah, it's going to be in about 2 weeks. Studying now, kind of sorting out what topics you struggle with, which ones, that you're, okay with. What can we expect the test to be like? Okay, so most Bio 130 tests are multiple choice, so that's a plus. And this year, and I think she started it last year really, there's group tests as well. So you'll take your individual test and then you'll take your group test, which is basically where we put you in random groups of 3 or 4, and you get to communicate and kind of feed off of each other's ideas and take the test together, which significantly raises scores typically. So that's a good thing. But yeah, typically multiple choice. I'll have to look at it and get back to you, but I would say mostly multiple choice. Okay, are there any more questions? And is someone drawing on my screen? In a group test, will we lose points if our something? So you'll actually be working together, and there will be like, from what I understand, a group leader. So I'll find out, I'll get her to talk more about that probably in class as we get closer to the test day, and she'll go over specific details. But you'll be able to directly communicate with your team members through Collaborate and kind of convince each other of the right answer. Okay, we're working on different types of molecules. So will she make us show how to do dehydration synthesis? Okay, you'll probably just have to acknowledge that it's happening. And like for the molecule, she may put up a picture of a carb and, what type of biomolecule is this? A, carbohydrate, B, lipid, C, phospholipid, D, protein, something like that. And I'm pretty sure it'll just, if she does like ask for like a dehydration synthesis or a hydrolysis, it'll be like the process of breaking molecules apart through addition of water is referred to as a hydrolysis, dehydration synthesis, stuff like that. Does that answer your questions? Okay. What group is in class tomorrow? Okay, so I think it is Yeah, Group A. I think yeah, A, B, Group 1, 2. Yeah, I think it's Group 1. Because Group 2 was in last Friday, I'm pretty sure. Okay, any more questions? James W. is drawing, I think it's B. Okay, well, let me look at my calendar. I thought it was B too. Honestly, you are probably right. Let's take a look though. So, Group 1. Yeah, okay. So it is Group 1 because Group B, Group is in class Friday and they alternate. Yeah, that's correct. Because Fridays are every other. Because Group 1 meets on Mondays, Group 2 meets on Wednesdays, and then you alternate the Fridays. So the first Friday, Group 1, second Friday, which is last Friday, Group 2 was in, and so now it's Group 1. Are there study guides beforehand, or do we go only strictly off the notes? So I don't think that she has any like study guides uploaded, but I'll try to make a general outline for you guys to kind of, topics that you should definitely focus on for the exam. I'll try to make that for you. But mostly you just go off your notes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there aren't any more questions and you all are good, then I'm good. So thank you for coming. Again, for the learning styles inventory, the one that I suggest to use is VARC if you're interested in that. But there are tons of others you can use. And I will see you all in class tomorrow if you are Group 1, 11 a.m. Okay. You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. Anytime you guys need anything, feel free to email me. And, if you're in the 9 a.m., it was nice to meet all of you all, even though I didn't get to see. Thank you for. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.